Welcome to the Speaking of Women's Health podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Holly Thacker, and I am back in the Sunflower House for the month of July to start off with a new episode that includes celebrating Independence Day, July 4th. We just finished with Father's Day. And if you didn't hear my podcast on hair thinning and new treatment options for alopecia and androgenic hair thinning, and that hair thinning is not just for dear old dad. At the time that I recorded the podcast, I didn't have my hair extensions. And since I am not a hair person, I've never been able to grow my hair past about here, my shoulder length. I got extensions, not the permanent ones. Like several people I know, I don't have the time or the patience to do it. But really ones that you can just slip on. I first got them because my granddaughter, as you probably have heard me talk about, Artemis, just is so entranced with hair, and she really wants to grow her hair long. The first podcast I ever did last year in season 1 was on iron, because you need good iron levels to grow hair. And so in the spring and early summer, I've taken her to some shows and some princess theaters where we've gotten dressed up and worn our tiaras. I think maybe you've seen some of our pictures on Speaking of Women's Health, even from last year. So as we've moved on from Mother's Day and Father's Day, and now it is the 4th of July, Independence Day. Happy birthday, the good US of A, red, white, and blue. We're also celebrating Social Wellness Month. Maybe you haven't heard about that. But I think celebrations of birthdays or momentous historic times, special events in families, this kind of all goes hand in hand, because a lot of these events we celebrate with friends and family, and sometimes even coworkers. And on our Speaking of Women's Health website, we have some great content. And Dr. Irina Todorov wrote a guest column for us on speakingofwomenshealth.com that was titled "Feeling Socially Connected is More Important Than You Think." And certainly, we know that we humans are very social, and even having pets can be helpful for your blood pressure and your health. Touching preemie newborn babies and giving them baby massage actually helps them grow. So it's really not surprising that a study that was published 14 years ago concluded that there's a 50% increased likelihood of survival for people that have strong social relationships. And the lack of human connection can actually be very harmful to your health, just like being overweight or obese medically, or cigarette smoking, or excessive alcohol consumption, and lack of physical activity, the things that we're always harping on, that we need to be strong and be healthy and be in charge. So what does it mean to be socially connected? Well, you want to feel close to others and share bonds. It involves feeling cared for or feeling loved or valued. I can tell you that when I am with my granddaughters and doing something maybe as simple as just helping them wash their hands after going potty, to have this little one look up at me and say, "Mimi, you're just the best. I love you so much." It just has this whole outpouring of all these good neurotransmitters. And I think when you can connect with someone, even a stranger, and have a social interaction or a discussion, and you can share a moment or feel like your true self, having meaningful relationships is so valuable and so beneficial. rather than just having very superficial acquaintances. Now, in general, I think women tend to nurture more. Friendships tend to be at the center of their families, planning social events. Um, Men, many times, have a smaller circle of support, although that's not always true. But I think that it's important to avoid loneliness. And now that we're 4+ years finally of coming out of the, pandemic and the lockdowns, that was a terrible time. It was a terrible time for people's health, a terrible time to not gather, to be together, to mark occasions, whether they're joyous, like weddings or graduations or proms, or celebrations of life and funerals, times when families and friends need to be together. And regardless of where you live, if it's in a big city or a rural area, suburban area, whether you work at home or work outside of the home, whether you're married or single or separated, whether you work for yourself or a big company or a medium-sized company, really any of these situations, it's very important to get a deep connection. And I think having curiosity and the attitude of service is very important of building meaningful relationships. And here are tips that Dr. Irina Todorov gave us about deepening or strengthening relationships. Listen attentively without interruptions. I have to remind myself of this. I have so much I want to share all the time, and I have such a limited amount of time sometimes with patients, with coworkers, with friends, with family. And being fully present at the time of the conversation, like not trying to multitask like we women frequently do, answering emails, checking phone messages, listening to a podcast while still trying to have a conversation with someone. So, right now, you can put this podcast on pause if there's someone or something that needs your attention. That's the great thing about podcasts, right? You can stop, start, speed up, read the show notes, go back and listen. And I think that's part of the reason why some podcasts are very popular, because it feels like you're right there connected with that person who's talking with you. But those in-person connections really have to be nurtured. And some of the best relationships grow out of shared relationships. So challenge yourself to try some new activities, maybe taking a cooking class, joining an interest group, going to a book club at your local library, organizing some community event, or doing something at your place of worship. Signing up for physical activities like a dance class or group exercise or hiking. And I think to diversify the group of people you meet on a regular basis can be important, to not only associate with people like yourself or similar age or similar interests. Having a wide variety of exposures to people with different perspectives and different backgrounds, different ages. I think the older one gets, the more you have to develop some younger friendships. One of the reasons I enjoy golf so much is you can do it with a wide variety of skill levels and age ranges and both sexes. In fact, one of my friends who you have met on an earlier podcast in season 1, attorney Ava Saulnier, I met on the golf course. And I remember introducing her to my older sons who also like to golf. And I said, "Oh, this is my new friend, Ava." And my middle son, Emerson's like, "She can't be your friend, mother. She's a millennial. She is too young to be your friend." And I have always had friendships of a variety of ages. And I think the older one gets, and the more socially adept one gets, the more likely this is to be successful. Some people like to volunteer for a cause that they believe in. In a 4-year study, participants who volunteered 100 or more hours per year versus 0 hours per year had a reduced risk of mortality, i.e., longer lifespan. And being in the anti-aging field, I'm always looking to improve both the quality and the length of life. And I encouraged all of my children, even during their busy high school years with school and sports and commitments, to volunteer. And my husband and I were particularly proud when they won awards for, guess what, more than 100 hours of volunteer work. And it's important to note that people that volunteer and show gratitude have higher scores for physical activity, positive affect, optimism, and a purpose in life, and much lower scores of depression, hopelessness, loneliness, and physical function limitations. Our guest podcaster, Sylvia Morrison, who you've heard from on tips to get your medical appointments, to tips to planning for and enjoying your retirement, to staying physically and mentally active, has always volunteered. Even when she was a busy mother and working full-time, she still volunteered. She volunteers regularly in her retirement. You've heard from Nurse Lily, who is retired, and we've had her on the podcast talking about retirement. She also has been a volunteer person and has done things to help people out and her family and her friends to keep pursuing that feeling of participation and love and value. Using technology for your advantage, not disadvantage. This is something I think we need to actively teach people at all ages. So don't allow physical distance to prevent you from keeping up meaningful connections that you already have. And so here are some ways that Dr. Irina Todorov has connected with family and friends who live all over the world. She uses video platforms like Skype and FaceTime or WhatsApp. You can have dinner together with a topic discussion. I remember setting up Zoom meetings with girlfriends around the country to share information during the pandemic about the latest medical advances and to socialize and even have Zoom happy hours. Now, I think in person is much better. And one of the things that my husband muses about, that he thinks that was really bad about the pandemic, is people got so used to being remote and using technology that a lot of the business networking and social community engagement has dropped off. So some other activities is, planning time to cook or bake with a family member or friend, including relatives and neighbors and maybe other people who don't have as much opportunity to socialize to come to different events like your 4th of July celebration or a birthday party or some other time of celebration. Socializing, playing cards, chess, my middle son Emerson's favorite game, chess, even simple checkers or playing Uno with some of the neighborhood children, helping to volunteer at school or with task or homework. That's one of the things that our guest podcaster Sylvia does. She helps in Florida volunteer and help out with reading with 3rd graders. She volunteers for the Sight Center, and she does mentoring, free mentoring to young people looking to launch or change careers or obtain a new position. So as you're starting to make your plans for celebrating America's birthday, Independence Day, and you gather with friends and family and perhaps neighbors, celebrating our nation's independence with fun, food, and we'll go over some fun recipes too, and perhaps some sparklers or fireworks. Um, think about the importance of maintaining these social connections. And so, even though some of the cookouts for holidays tend to lean a little bit more on the less healthy side, uh, we still like to try to emphasize making the most nutritious and eye appealing food as possible with a little bit of a healthy kick. And with just a few slight adjustments, you can have a very healthy and very delicious picnic or barbecue. And you are listening to the Speaking of Women's Health podcast with your host, Dr. Holly Thacker, the executive director of Speaking of Women's Health. And we are talking all things Independence Day, July 4th, summer fun, and the month that connects social connections and social wellness month, because our ability to be social and to care about others and interact with others and share experiences and activities and emotions with others really does improve our physical health and our longevity. So planning ahead is always important. If you're going to host a get together, it's a good idea to put together that menu. And it doesn't have to be formal, but trying to pay attention to maybe using some red, white, and blue fruits, vegetables, making sure you've got good protein, lean meats, whole grains, avoiding the seed oils and gratuitous sugar is so important. And we do have a lot of fun, wonderful, and healthy recipes on speakingofwomenshealth.com. Red velvet berry trifle. With just a few little mixes, you could make a stupendous trifle layered red velvet cake with some pudding and berries and whipped topping to make a great dessert. And this recipe comes from Holly Clegg's Trim and Terrific Eating Well to Fight Arthritis cookbook. And it starts out with some red velvet cake mix and 2 eggs. The kind of eggs I like to get are the eggs with omega-3, because omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. It includes a half of cup of olive oil and 1 1/3 cup of water with some reduced fat cream cheese, about 3 ounces, 3 ounces of skim milk. I tend to buy the Fairlife brand because it has a long shelf life and no lactose, because I have lactose intolerant people in my family. And 2 boxes, which are 4 servings each, of instant white chocolate pudding and pie filling. A 1/4 cup of orange juice, some sliced strawberries, raspberries, and blueberries, and an 8-ounce container of non-fat frozen whipped topping thawed. And so you preheat the oven to 350 degrees. You coat 2 9-inch round cake pans with that nonstick olive oil cooking spray. And in the mixing bowl, you put the cake mix, the oil, the eggs, the water, and blend. And then you pour the batter into prepared pans and you bake for 20 minutes at 350 degrees, just until that little toothpick comes out clean. Meanwhile, in a bowl, you could mix the cream cheese and milk, and then use the remaining milk and both boxes of pudding. And then in a trifle bowl or a large glass bowl, layer the cake, 2 tablespoons of orange juice, half the pudding and berries and whipped topping, and then repeat the layers, ending with the whipped topping. And the nutritional components per serving is 182 calories, 28% fat, 6 grams of fat with 2 grams saturated, cholesterol 18 milligrams, sodium 275 milligrams, a gram of dietary fiber, 30 grams of carbohydrates, of which 19 grams of sugar, and it's 3 grams of protein. And the diabetic exchange is 1 fat and 2 carbohydrates. The next recipe that you might want to consider for your Independence Day celebration is grilled kebabs, because what is the 4th of July without a backyard grill? And what's better than healthy kebabs? With vegetables fresh from your market or your own garden, you can have fun substituting mango and pineapple and tomatoes. You can try pork or lamb or even chicken or any of your favorite meats. I particularly like the grass-fed tenderloin, beef tenderloin, or grilling steaks. And they tend to be a little bit thinner, so I think they're easier to cut. I like to use all sorts of colorful vegetables. And I like to make my own marinade, but you could do store-bought, but I would try to recommend avoiding those with seed oils. Cooking spray. I think red onions are very colorful and healthy. My husband loves mushrooms, and mushrooms are very healthy for you. But somehow they just are too slippery in my mouth, and they're a fungus among us. So I tend to still include them, and they're easy enough to just take away from the side. I do like truffles, though. Brightly colored peppers, summer squash and zucchini are good things to grill, and using those grape, cherry, or yellow tomatoes. So part of the preparation is to cut the meat into 1-ounce chunks, cut the vegetables into large pieces, and then marinate your vegetables separate than the meat. And you soak your wooden skewers in water to keep them from burning. That's a very important tip. And you alternate your meat with your veggies, and you spray with some oil on the grill. And you grill until the meat is cooked thoroughly, rotating the position at least 1 time on the grill. If you're going to use those cherry tomatoes or grape tomatoes, just add those like a minute before the kebabs are finished cooking. And each recipe makes about 3 servings. And the nutritional analysis is about 268 calories, 28 grams of protein, and 15 grams of carbs, with 9 grams of fat. 3 are saturated. And the fat and cholesterol and calorie count does vary a bit depending on the cut of beef that you choose. But beef is very nutritional, high in protein, many minerals, zinc, and iron. So here are some fun variations on the traditional burger. And my favorite to do in July is the blueberry burger. We have a salmon burger recipe, because some of our readers and listeners avoid meat and still want a burger with salmon. And the blueberry burger recipe is from the late Florence Henderson, who shared it with our Speaking of Women's Health team many years ago when she was the National Honorary Chairperson and co-host of Lifetime Speaking of Women's Health. Both of these recipes are on our website, speakingofwomenshealth.com. If you don't have that bookmarked on your phone or your computer or iPad, please do that. And we also have another great recipe that I think is a lot of fun for the summer. It's a fresh corn salad, and it's really great with crunchy, cool cucumbers, Artemis's favorite, and ripe, juicy tomatoes, creamy avocado. Avocado is full of heart-healthy fat, and corn. And it's a nutrition-loaded side dish, and it's quite festive, and you can add it to any meal. And the easy corn salad recipes can be a meal unto themselves, or you can use it as a condiment or as a salsa. The fresh corn salsa recipe comes from Holly Clegg's Guy's Guide to Eating Well cookbook, and it was one of her favorite summer easy corn salad recipes. And if you only eat corn on the cob and don't use it in recipes, you're missing out. There's nothing like fresh corn on the cob in the summer. And I think it's kind of not the 4th of July, at least for myself, if I'm not having a barbecue, corn on the cob, and some fresh watermelon. And maybe um, starting off the day or having as a dessert strawberries and blueberries and a little whipped cream to make a red, white, and blue dessert or side. So there's not too much to taking grilled corn on the cob and just simply taking a sharp knife and cutting off the corn using a sharp or a serrated knife lengthwise. And there are also other, specific gadgets that can be used. So the crunchy, fruity coleslaw is another fun summer recipe. So you pick up a bag of shredded cabbage if you want to have more effortless preparation, or you can shred the cabbage yourself, like sometimes I do. It's a vibrant colored salad with a mixture of sweet and savory ingredients in a sweet balsamic vinaigrette. It's another recipe from the late, great Holly Clegg. And these recipes and links to her recipe books are on Speaking of Women's Health. Watermelon side dishes. Who does not love fresh, juicy watermelons in the summer? It's kind of quintessential summer, isn't it? Although Artemis tells me that orange creamsicles are quintessential summer. She started saying that when she was 2. So Holly Clegg has shared on our website. One is watermelon tomato salad. There's also a watermelon feta cheese salsa and a watermelon cantaloupe salad. I sometimes like to mix corn and watermelon and pickled jalapenos and black beans to make a fun summer salsa. I also love putting fresh basil with watermelon and feta cheese. And I'm trying to experiment with using a big watermelon and cutting it out in a design like a basket, or you can do it bunny rabbit ears at Easter time, to use the watermelon rind itself as your serving bowl. But I think sometimes in the summer, you don't need to do something too fancy. You just need cool, refreshing, fun outdoor picnic foods. So some other health tips. In addition to eating healthy on this important, very important, it's one of my favorite, if not my favorite holidays, Independence Day. I am just so proud and patriotic to be an American. It's important to not forget some other health tips besides just eating well, and also socializing, because this is Social Wellness Month. Really make a concerted effort to reach out to loved ones, to some older people that might be shut in, and just plan to expand your horizon. Now, I know sometimes it can be too much if your social circle is so large that it's hard to keep up with everyone. But it is important to have meaningful social connections. So the other summer health tips: stay hydrated, especially when it's hot out. It's very important to have plenty of cold water throughout the day. And if you end up squeezing in a workout before the festivities, you probably won't feel quite as guilty if you have a couple of extra fun taste of side dishes. And what I like to do is just get a little bit of a taste of what is out, particularly if you have potlucks or if everybody gets together for the summer holiday. I know our Center for Specialized Women's Health likes to get together and get all the kids and grandkids together and get to see our coworkers, significant others, and people can bring their dog to the park, and we get to kind of see that whole social connection. So I think trying just a little bit is a good thing. And if there's one dish that you really like, you can get the recipe. Maybe you might go back for seconds, but as I always say, try to wait about 20 minutes after eating to see if you're really hungry, and you can always bring some of it home. I usually bring little containers so that if someone really liked one of the dishes, they can take some of it home. They don't have to feel compelled to eat it there. And the same thing when going out to eat. You should always have a doggy bag, even if you don't have a dog. And those make great lunches for me the next day at work. But if you are going to exercise in the middle of the dog days of summer, you might have to change where you exercise and avoid the peak heat and humidity. And sometimes that heat makes us a little bit more sluggish, and you don't want to get lazy. You want to stick to your routine. The sun is particularly potent. If you haven't listened to my prior podcast on different sunscreens and blocking out the rays and wearing hats and umbrellas, swimming is so much fun. I just love to swim at the Shoreby Club that I'm a member of, which is right on the shores of beautiful Lake Erie. It's very important, though, to never swim alone and always be watchful of younger ones. And it's so important to start swimming lessons at a young age because, unfortunately, a not uncommon cause of tragic death in young ones is from drowning. Insect repellent, particularly at dusk and dawn when the bugs start biting. And it's better to spray your clothes rather than your skin if you're using permethrin. And there are some sprays that are appropriate for the younger children. And very importantly, on this 4th of July, let the experts handle the fireworks, because 75% of all firework-related injuries in the United States happen during the month around July 4th, according to the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission. So I hope you and your friends and your loved ones have a very exciting and fun Independence Day celebration. Thanks so much for joining me in the Sunflower House on this episode of Speaking of Women's Health. And if you have a question or a topic that you would like to hear, go to speakingofwomenshealth.com and complete our Contact Us form on the About link. And you just might hear your topic or question on the next episode. And share the podcast. If you don't already subscribe, hit that follow button so you don't miss a future episode. And you can listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can see us and see the podcast on Rumble channel and YouTube. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating. Have a wonderful Independence Day and cherish the time you have with your friends and family. Remember, be strong, be healthy, and be in charge.